Welcome into another Q&A, Questions in Alcohol, where we talk about all things alcohol, whether it's the drinks, the art, the food in Kentucky and beyond. And today we're going to be in Kentucky talking with Castle Key Distillery out near Frankfort, Kentucky. But remember, you can find us at hopspirits.com. We're also on social media at hopspirits, all one word, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter. We also have a YouTube page where you can catch all of these episodes and all of our other fun things that we do, like our taste test there as well. So like I said, we're here with, we're staying in Kentucky this week, and we're talking with Brett Connors, the head blender, and as he likes to say, or maybe other people like to say, the whiskey wizard at Castle Key Distillery. Welcome in, Brett.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We're looking forward to it.
Now, do you just willingly tell people you're the whiskey wizard, or did that kind of come about?
I think a little bit of both. You know, I've always been kind of nerd leaning in my personal preferences and hobbies, and I think spirits is kind of like the ultimate form of that interest. You know, you're kind of making potions. It's creative. It's magic in a way. There's a lot of art involved, and we're not always the biggest fans of traditional titles unless I need something. Then it's like director of whatever, just so people email you back. But I think the reality is, we have a pretty big family here, and we keep it laid back with our titling.
Hey, nothing wrong with that, and it's also just a sign of some fun things, and also your role as a head blender. I mean, you kind of do some magic things that happen. I always like to say, I joke with some folks, you're like a mad scientist in a way, or at least that's how I always picture it, like sitting in the back, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then something amazing comes out.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that kind of the back end work. Our job as on the blending team is to highlight the work of the rest of the distillery, which is very scientific and very industrially oriented. We just get to do the art of it, which is a little bit of the fun part. So.
Well, and then you've had kind of an interesting career. Reading up about you. Can you tell a little bit about yourself and kind of just your background?
Yeah, I mean, I think my background, I've always been interested in spirits and winemaking. And then when I was in college at the University of George Mason, I started working in, more like casual fine dining with a great restaurant corporation up in DC, Great American Restaurants. And then after I went to graduate school at the University of Malta in conjunction with George Mason, I moved to Kentucky to chase a brunette. And then I just started working in restaurants again. It pays really well. I think, if you haven't done food service like professionally, it teaches you a lot of patience and people skills and, just conversational skills, and teaches you how to want to work too. Because if you don't like it, well, you don't make great money. And then through that, I ended up meeting Will and Wes through kind of happenstance and started initially with Castle Key, more on the hospitality development side, the bar developmental side, working on a lot of our historical documentation, our historical tax credit documents and application. And then just through it being a startup, I had a lot of secondary opportunities to get more involved in product and product development and the other things I'm kind of interested in. So, it's been a wild ride. I guess I started planning tours and I ended up blending whiskey, which is definitely something I'm better at than tourism planning. I'm not great at it, frankly.
Well, I mean, I was gonna say, I mean, you literally, because you kind of, like you said, you got in at the start when Castle and Key was, reborn. The distillery was brought back to life. I mean, and now you're the head blender. I mean, what's that been like to see your role evolve and kind of the evolution of not just what you do, but also kind of what Castle and Key has been able to do?
Man, I'm just a huge fan after experiencing this. I couldn't be a bigger advocate for, taking a leap of faith with like a startup or a more entrepreneurial perspective, especially in your 20s. You have a lot of life ahead of you. So, I was kind of smart enough in my mid 20s to realize that it's okay to take a pretty big risk. So I left a, wonderful restaurant company to work with, Bluegrass Hospitality in Central Kentucky. And I just took a chance kind of on Will and Wes, the founding partners at Castle Key, and I took a chance on myself. And they had already built a really great team with like our previous master distiller, Marianne Eves, who was, phenomenally gifted and like had a ton of industry experience. But the greatest part about a startup is you're often understaffed, right? So there was everybody had to do everything regardless of if you knew what you were doing or not, so there's a lot of opportunity for education and hands-on learning and just a lot of great directionality, I guess. So if you show aptitude for something, you could take more ownership and you could grab more responsibility that in a big corporation, you're just not going to have that luxury. So I like to think I work pretty hard. I don't think I'm the smartest person in the industry. That's not even close. But I do think I work pretty hard. So just grabbing the opportunities that were presented to me, maybe opportunistic, I guess, is like another good word, not in a negative way, but and as we added team members, I think we added a lot of skilled staff, and I tried to listen and learn where I could, and ended up getting into a position where I have kind of my dream job, which is, it could have not worked out either, and I would have been totally happy going back to the restaurant world. But yeah, if you're in your 20s and you're listening to this, take a chance. If you're in your 40s and you're listening to this, take a chance. Yeah, life's too boring to do something you're not happy with.
Well, you touched on it too. Having that hospitality background, working in that industry, it's kind of what you do now as a blender, just a different kitchen, so to speak. And do you ever kind of, because I know you enjoyed, like you said, that type of world, but obviously you're not dealing with food per se, but you're definitely in a kitchen getting to cook up some interesting things.
Yeah, you're still dealing with spirits in a way, but I think at the end of the day, like, the reality is we're not selling like a neutral widget, right? Like, we're not a nail company, or like, we don't sell fenders. Like, we sell experience. I think having a background in hospitality teaches you what you're doing is it's kind of a mixture of like theater and performance and social interaction, and it gets to be just a moment in time. And I think that's what, we try to bottle with our team as well. It's not only are we selling you a really wonderful whiskey, we're selling you an opportunity to connect with others, or to connect with history, to connect with experientially just something you're interested in. And I think that's, what we're really prideful about. Like, obviously we're a whiskey company first and foremost, but, in a lot of ways we're selling experience, and we're selling hospitality, and we're selling storytelling at the same time. And I think, working in food and beverage gives you an opportunity to get really good at that stuff. So, the product side, while it's hard to learn, is, I think, easier to learn than the soft skills of how to talk to people. Like, so, yeah.
No, that is very true. Being able to actually do something by yourself is one thing. To actually go out in front of people and deal with the public at large can be a quite daunting task. And you also touched about kind of the history and the storytelling. I mean, you are an art history degree. It's one of your degrees. You're a man of many talents. One, how does an art history guy get into whiskey? And then two, you did put that degree to good use, working there and helping with, like you mentioned, the historical designations. You guys got the National Register of Historical Placing listings and things like that.
Yeah. Man, I think, I did art history as an undergrad because I love art and I love history, and, I love the kind of interwoven connectivity of like cultural aspects of both of those things. But the reality was I wasn't, again, smart enough to get a PhD in it. I don't speak any second languages well. I speak some German abysmally. But I think the reality is, like, I thought I wanted to do museum curation. It just wasn't, I quickly realized, the right fit for me. But that didn't mean that I wanted to be completely, absolved of that interest or passion. I grew up in a household where we collected antiques my entire life. We collected art. My dad collected jewelry. He didn't wear a single piece of it, but he loved buying it, right? And I think that passion was like just forged in me from a really early age. So the second I came on site and saw, a Castle Key where it's physically around you in a way where I'm a firm believer that places have power, and, places have like a feeling to them. And when you walk on 113 acres and there's a massive limestone castle that was built in the 1800s that greets you as you come down a bend in kind of the middle of nowhere, central Kentucky, it's striking. And, with historical preservation, I think it deserves to be preserved. It deserves to be honored and just respected in a way that, there's thousands of people that worked here for decades. And for them to not have the ability to continue the legacy or their contributions to the state of Kentucky is something that I'm just not a fan of. And I think art history is both the appreciation of art and art introspectives, but also preservation perspectives. Losing history is a really bad thing. Accurately retelling history is just as important, though. I think there's a desire to often spin history and creative ways, and that's just never something that we were a fan of.
Well, and you touched on it too. The history out there is amazing. Can you talk a little bit about the site that is now the Castle Key Distillery and just its long history? While Castle Key's only been there for a short time in the whole big picture, the site's been around for a while.
Yeah, I mean, currently we are barely a chapter in the history of the site. We hope through the decisions we're making to be a long term, maybe like a full couple chapters in our history. But the reality is, historically, the site started as a distillery in the early 1800s as a farmer miller distiller, a grist mill distiller. Somebody was turning their excess grains into what we think of as moonshine. Then through that course of time, you see as some small commercial distilleries start to develop. But then the real growth of the site and kind of even our hospitality's perspective is still kind of pinned to what E.H. Taylor achieved here in the 1880s. E.H. Taylor is a monolith. He starts in banking, through banking, fine commodities trading, and then he goes on to work for Old Crow. He builds the Hermitage. He goes up the river on the Kentucky River into Frankfort and builds OFC, which becomes modern-day Buffalo Trace. He's involved up at Old Oscar Pepper, that becomes modern-day Woodford Reserve. He just has an impressive legacy of development and creativity and entrepreneurship and pushing the industry forward to the point where when he comes here in the 1880s, he wants to do something no one had seen before. At that point, distilleries were functional. You made whiskey and you hopefully didn't die while doing it, which is our number one goal here from a safety perspective. But, I think the reality is, with E.H. Taylor's vision, he was frustrated by our lack of competitiveness against other spirits. I know on your podcast and show that you discuss a lot of different categories of goods. And the reality is at that point in time, bourbon was the cheapest and ugliest product you could drink. If you were of the American affluent, you drank cognacs, brandies, scotches, eau de vies, rye, rum were all seen as higher quality than what we produced. I mean, Irish whiskey, Canadian whiskey. And it frustrated E.H. Taylor. He learned a lot of his distillation techniques in Europe. So he thought it was unfair if he was using a lot of the same technological advancements that we weren't able to price appropriately or compete against those goods. So his vision was marketing. He built a rail line all the way from Frankfurt to our site. He commissioned private rail cars from New Orleans, Chicago, New York to bring out guests and visitors. Even our hospitality space that we're still utilizing in the modern era was a train depot that he built named Taylorton Station, where you can grab a cocktail or use the bathroom in it. It's great. He built massive pleasure gardens on site. He built a sunken garden on site. His vision was, if you're making a luxury good, you should be advertising that. So he was one of the first to use lithographic images of his distillery to show you how bougie and fancy it was. Even in the modern era, I think of a brand, like LVMH, like when you own like Louis Vuitton and Moet Hennessy and all these other brands, like their advertisement is like somebody rolling up in a Bugatti, like drinking champagne. It's more of an aspirational good. We try to price a little bit more affordably so people can grab it. But, I drive a Honda Accord, man. That's not necessarily our aesthetic. But, I think the reality is, his vision was to make it premium and to make it accessible. So, we even in our modern hospitality program was how do you get the doors open and how do you let people experientially engage with your site? I think that's the way you build long-term consumers is it's not just about what's in the bottle. As a blender, I think it's a lot of about what's in the bottle, but it's subsequently about, are you giving people a good time? How do you make them care about what you're doing?
It's an amazing history there. And you touched on it too with the gardens, the just the amazing site that is the distillery. When people go out there and they can tour it, what can they actually see? Because it's pretty breathtaking, from everything that I have witnessed.
My breath's still taken away. Like on a pretty day like this, it's going to be in the 70s. I walked on site and, I woke up late. I'm like answering emails. I'm feeling frantic. I step on site and it just melts away from you. Like you just realize that you work in one of the prettiest places in Kentucky. But the site's open now Thursday through Sunday. We kind of treat it like a public park. If you want to just come on site, we have 2 little bar windows you can walk up to, grab a drink, sit by the creek, enjoy the weather. You're welcome to bring food if you want to picnic. You just can't bring alcohol because like the government cares.
Those darn
bring
laws.
offsite alcohol. Yeah, dude. Man, it's really taxes if we want to be frank. But Yeah, so we will provide the alcohol if you want to buy a drink, but you can sit by the creek, enjoy the weather. So you can see, we have a quarter-mile long botanical trail. You can enjoy the spring house, which has existed since the late 1800s. It's a Roman style bathhouse or Paris style, which is just gorgeous. We have a cocktail garden around that. We also have our boiler room, which is our primary like retail space and visitor center. So I think our retail team does an amazing job. If you ever need to buy anybody a present, or you just want to get a brand new barber jacket, they do a heck of a job stocking that space with just interesting and cool merchandise and apparel and things to drink. We release a lot of single barrels there of rye whiskey. So I think there was one that just dropped this week too. So if you're popping through Kentucky and you want a really special bottle of rye whiskey, we tend to have a couple on site too. On the tour side, we're doing kind of an open campus thing now that we've been tweaking and working on. The goal was to expand access to the facility, but frankly, we're seeing more guests and visitors than we ever expected. So we're still playing with that a little bit. I think come June, July, you might see a more traditional tour structure put back in place as well. But currently, I think it's like $10. You get a half-ounce pour, and you can walk through production, see some of the gardens, grounds. It's kind of a station, self-guided experience a little bit. I think our goal has always been to layer different guest experiences where if you want to come out and we throw great cocktail parties, we do, garden tastings with John Karloftis, who did our garden, but also just pop in and say hi. We want to make it where you can experience the distillery in different ways.
Well, and you touched on it too with, kind of the products that you all have. And, in addition to being a beautiful location, you have been able to put out some amazing products. You just, the bourbon just launched recently with the first one. I believe the second one's coming out here in May.
It's before it dropped. It dropped
Okay.
now. It sold out so quickly, and everybody was flipping out on us. So we rushed it to market. Our team worked some overtime. We got it labeled up, and batch 2 is hitting shelves like.
So there we go. And then, how's it been to be part of that process to get the Restoration Rye out, and now the bourbon as well? Because those were the kind of the quote unquote last things that you guys were finally able to get out.
Oh man, it's stressful. I guess from a PR side, I'm supposed to talk about how like joyful it is. I think it's joyful now. But working on the blend side, with final product and determination and package, it's stressful. I think a lot of it is myself and my co-blender that I work with a lot, John Brown, who's the head of quality and R&D. There's a lot of pressure on us to not mess it up. Because I think, it would be a falsehood to say that we're not working with something already beautiful. You're kind of given the keys to something really special. And, our distillery team works so hard. They've worked so hard for really over 6 years now. We've had a lot of different individuals involved with the site over time. So you're dealing with the history of a lot of people's efforts. And the distillation side is very scientific. Our warehouse team works so hard. The logistics team works really hard. So I think our job is just to highlight their work. I think there's like a personality thing too, where it's like neither of us really like to be interviewed. Thank you for interviewing. If that's
Well,
like
I'm sorry. We'll buy it.
No. I love it because I get to highlight our team's efforts, right? I think that's what's so special about being an independently owned or family run distillery. We don't have a lot of ego here. The goal is to be really respectful of everybody's contributions. We have over 100 staff, and I think Restoration Rye, even the label for that bottle, is indicative of the contributions that dozens of individuals have made over the course of this project. So when I say stressful about product release, it's more, are we doing everybody's efforts justice in the bottling? And I think that's what's stressful about it for us is, where I think me and John are, not to be unhumble, I think we're good at what we do, but it's also, we want to make sure everybody's appreciative of the work of our whole team. It's also joyous. I mean, this is the first product determined completely by our team that's been released from Castle Key in over 5 decades. So you have kind of a secondary tier of like historical pressure, right? Like the ghost of VH Taylor, like popping up. Yeah, like the ghost of VH Taylor waking me up in the middle of the night is like legitimate fear I have. But I think it's that too. It's like this is a lot of people have staked their livelihoods and life on this facility. I'm not the only one. I left a great job and with a great company to come here. And I think that's kind of what we are as a team, as a group of dreamers, where people who have coalesced and all seen the same vision and same opportunity. And to get that finally in a bottle is a big deal. And for it to be aged the way it is, that's a huge credit to our team's patience. And, I always love when consumers, like, we'd launch a new product and on Instagram, it'd be like, we have a new gin coming out. And the first comment is always, when's the bourbon going to be ready? It's like summer music series. When's the bourbon going to be ready? So I think we bear a big responsibility to our fan base and to our consumers and everyone who's supported us for decades. Or a decade, basically. So stressful, but also really exciting. Both.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, and but that is the process, especially when, these were your first bourbon releases, and the Restoration Rye. I've actually had the chances to try those over time, and I love those. The one thing with that process is you guys do batch releases, like 1, 2, or 3. Why kind of go that route? And can you talk a little bit about the Restoration Rye as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think batch dynamic releases, making sure that every batch is a unique flavor profile and variant and just special. It was really our way to fight. And, I think when you look at whiskey and the growth of the industry, there's a lot of really large facilities. Even in the 90s, you either made a barrel of whiskey a day or you made a couple thousand, right? So you have these big corporations that have better funding. They have massive marketing teams. They have huge budgets. They make great whiskey. Like, that's not even a criticism. Like, some of these facilities like Heaven Hill or even, Sazerac, Wild Turkey, like, they all make great bourbon. And they've been doing it for a hell of a long time. So as a newcomer to that industry, our view is like, well, how do you compete against that? It's like you have a single A baseball team and every week you're playing the, New York Yankees from the 90s. Like, it's not necessarily like the evenest of playing fields. So, we kind of looked at what you see in like viticulture or winemaking, where you have that as well. You have these massive family brands like the Jackson family, or, what the Wagners have done with like Caymus and their brands. But you also have some boutique brands that aren't necessarily that big. They don't have the same marketing budget. They're not paying Mila Kunis or Matthew McConaughey to represent them. We don't have that kind of money, man. If they want to do it for free, like, they're welcome to hit us up. But we don't have like Chrysler money to pay Matthew McConaughey. And I think our view was making sure that each batch was dynamic, gets to show off our blending ability. It gets to show off our whiskey dynamic. So every batch is going to be a little bit unique, but it's also, we are allowing our barrels to be what they want to be. When you're releasing kind of a flagship good, for a large brand, when you're selling 1 million cases, you want them all to taste the same. So you're normally trying to make your batches represent an idealized batch. Like, I think Buffalo Trace is all meant to taste like batch 1 or batch 2 of Buffalo Trace ever produced, where we were a young distillery. So the idea of making older whiskey taste like our first batch that was younger, or not allowing it to be itself, just wasn't the right fit for us. So there's also some seasonality to it. We can't outspin, but I think we can outwork. So every batch is a little bit different. So last year with our Restoration Rye, we released 3 batches. Batch 3 is what you're going to probably see most of currently. It's a awesome whiskey. I think it ended up being 105 proof, tons of stone fruit, really grain bright. Rye is always going to be minimum 3.5 years old. Bourbon's always a minimum of 4. Wheated bourbon's a minimum of 5. And then we're going to get those older as time goes on as well. Batch 1 rye whiskey that's coming out of Restoration Rye this year is probably my favorite batch we blended. It's a small batch, only 40 barrels, but it ended up being 113 proof.
Nice.
It is a monster. It is gorgeous. We're also charging the same amount for it. We do this crazy thing where we proof it wherever we like it, and then we just charge the same amount. It's crazy. I know. It's
hey, I love it. I love it. And I'm guessing, are you taking the same approach too with like the bourbon and the others, that kind of batch release and so forth?
Yeah, batch releases. I mean, eventually with bourbon, you'll see some bottle and bond probably. You'll probably see some single barrels at some point. With the early batches of bourbon, we're actually seeing some pretty substantial proof loss in the warehouse. With warehouse B being so long, high airflow, high humidity, we're losing a lot of proof. We entered historically low, around like 107, which is more pertinent to the industry prior to like the 90s and aughts. Like Wild Turkey used to enter that low, Michter's enters that low. There's a lot of other brands that like that low entry. But with our particular warehouse climate, we actually lose a lot of proof. So our 5-year-old was all under 100 proof, almost unanimously. These first 2 batches are a great example of that. When we dumped them, they were at barrel strength 100.5.
Oh, wow.
So we ended up only adding a tiny little bit of water. The first batch ended up being 98 in proof. The second batch ended up being 99 in proof. So I think bonded is going to take us a little bit until we get up into the 3rd and 4th floor to be able to have whiskey that is consistently higher than 100 proof. Because if you try to bond a whiskey and you dump it and it shows up at 98 proof, you're in a really bad situation.
It doesn't quite work out.
It's not bonded anymore, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, so I think we have a lot of intention to do some cool stuff in the future. But these first 2 batches of bourbon, super different. I think batch 1 is a crowd pleaser. Just big honeycomb, yeast roll, doughy, round, easy drinking. Batch 2 is a little bit more of a whiskey connoisseur, a little bit more nuanced, more dark fruit, more spice structure, more tannic compounding on the back end. So it's just a really full, funky, complex, round whiskey. But they're both great. And I think they're going to make a bunch of different people really happy.
Well, and then in addition to, the whiskey and the rye, or the bourbon and the rye, you also, like you said, you have gin, you have a vodka. I mean, so you guys kind of round out the whole portfolio there too.
We want to be every bottle on your bar cart, right? When you have friends over, I think our bottles are so great. And I think vodka and gin allows us to just show off our team's distillation ability. The thing I'm most prideful on site is our production team. I think we have some of the best distillers in the nation on site. We have a really, really great R&D team. And again, we can't outspend, but we do our best to outwork. So I think that side of the site works really hard to be creative and thoughtful. We don't cut any corners. We're not buying grain neutral spirit. We distill everything from scratch. That's probably not the best financial decision to make. It's not, the easiest to grow or to scale it, but I think it just shows off that we're serious. I always say fanatical attention to detail. If we're going to do something, we want to do every little bit of it ourselves. And I think that's not as common in the industry as it could be. There are some people that do a really great job of that. I always think of like the Neely family or some of these other distilleries that are just really doing a great job, taking ownership of their totality of process. So lots of good people are doing good stuff like us, but drink other people's bourbon too. I guess that's not what I'm supposed to do from a PR standpoint. But,
this was Brett's last interview allowed.
Yeah. Well, that's who we are too. The whiskey industry as a whole is I think we're in the golden era. Everybody's making some really great stuff. So, I think you should drink our bourbon. We obviously are about to sell out of it again. So, if it's not on shelf, there's, drink some rye whiskey or, try somebody else's stuff too.
Well, and the beauty too of like where we are in Kentucky is you can come here, you can go to your place, you can go up the road to Buffalo Trace, you can go down the road to Woodford. I mean, you can go to so many different places and check out so many different things and just kind of experience it all and see how, one, they're similar, but two, they're different. And I love that. And you kind of touched on it too. The bourbons are probably going to be very hard to find for a while. But where can folks find y'all's products in addition to obviously visiting the distillery?
Yeah, so I always recommend checking online on our website. We're distributed to 17 states. So, all those states get some product. The ones that we've been in longer, the Georgia, Tennessee, Indianas of the world, they tend to get pretty good volume releases. We're in some new states, but, they'll get bigger releases as time goes on. The distillery is a great place to come. If you're down the area, we try to always have something creative down here. It might be a rye single barrel or, some library batches of gin or something cool. Bourbon's just tough because we just don't have a lot of it. So, we do 100 bottles during the month of April. And I think Derby weekend, it wouldn't surprise me if we have some too. But, we do 100 bottles Thursday through Saturday morning. First come, first serve, 1 bottle per person. So that's always an opportunity. But I always say, we're a big fan of our retail partners. Check online, look on their Facebook pages. If you see one of us speaking, there might be product there. Recently I did like a tasting at, a liquor barn. We did a bottle signing. They had set back a ton of products. I bought a bottle. I don't have enough in my personal collection. So, I was really gracious that they did that because, it gives people the opportunity to try it. The only rule is if you find our bourbon, please God, open it. Don't put it on a shelf, crack it open. We work really hard. Don't sell it. If we wanted to write you a check, we'd write you a check. Open it, drink it, enjoy it, share it. I think that's all we ask if you do find a bottle.
Well, and those bottles are very pretty. They stand out, and I love the work. Like you said, it's a full team effort from from the start to the finish, and it shows through. And then I guess I'll wrap it up with what's next for y'all. Obviously, I know some new releases are coming down the pipeline, but what can you tell that won't get you kicked off and not allowed to speak ever again?
Oh man, I really try to thread the needle with that. It is what it is. No, our marketing team is well some of my favorite people on staff. So they go, I can't believe you said that, but we love you, and I love them too. So upcoming stuff, man, we're excited. We're going into a blending cycle. So after Derby, I have a little vacation planned, which I desperately need, and then myself and John Brown and our sensory team are going to start working through a lot of inventory to look at fall releases. We're probably going to start dabbling with a little weeded bourbon. It's about to hit 5 years old in fall. So if we can get together a batch we're really excited about, it wouldn't surprise me if you see a little bit of weeded bourbon this fall at 5 years old. Awesome. You might see some more batches of bourbon TBD. I know we might have a secret third batch that's about to release sometime in the summer. Keep your eyes out for that. It's really tasty. You'll probably see some more batches this fall for bourbon. You might see another batch of rye, that one that I mentioned earlier, batch 1 from 2022. It's probably going to hit kind of in the summer. It's going to be gorgeous for the summer. Tons of stone fruit, lots of baked cinnamon, just super floral. It's probably my favorite rye we've blended so far, and it's not a big batch. It's only 40 barrels. So if you see that one, you're going to want to snatch it up pretty quick. More single barrels, more gin. So, we just launched one of my favorite gins we've ever done is our spring Rise, R-I-S-E, from this year. It's like rose petal, tarragon, green cardamom, green peppercorn. It is just gorgeous. So keep buying and drinking our products and supporting us, and we can keep doing weirder and cooler stuff. So
I love it. And like I said earlier, folks, if you can, get out there, check out the facility. Like I said, it is absolutely beautiful. And Brett, this was a blast, and I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for your time. It's been a joy to speak with you guys, and hopefully all your listeners go out and buy some product and see what we're doing.
And that is also well worth it too. I forgot to say that part. That part is also well worth it, and I have enjoyed everything I've gotten to try.
Thank you.